Hello everyone, today I will be demonstrating alternative controls for Paint Yourself into a Corner. In addition, I will also show how you can allow players to customize aspects of your game by using a mobile device's built-in camera. To incorporate this, I have included an options menu which has replaced the credits button here. I have moved the credits to the top right corner instead. I'll show that very briefly. You can see here all the credits, including my name and the date that I last updated this. Now I'm going to show options. I'll cover this very briefly. You'll see a drop-down menu here. I will not cover the drop-down menu in this tutorial. That will be saved for the UI tutorial series I have recently started. What this tutorial will mainly focus on are the actual control designs and the functioning of the camera. So right now I'll show how the camera works. You click this and it'll start recording, and you can see my face here. Hello. And so I'll give this a good shot of my face and click take, and as you can see it froze with this image, and this is what will get wrapped around your little sphere character in the actual game, so you get to maybe see yourself rolling around. So let's go back and let's start a game. Now off on the side, I have started an emulator for a Nexus 5 phone to have as a separate client so that I can show this. So I'll start the game here. And maybe difficult to tell with the lighting, but you should be able to see my face going, ah. And before I make him too nauseous, I'm going to show that if I roll over the paint, the image is still there, but it gets changed the appropriate hue. And this works for all three colors, as you can see. Now I'm going to switch over to the emulator for a moment and show you the controls here. You can see I have switched to edges using that drop down. And you can just click on the edges and that will cause you to move around. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to start another game again, but this time I'm going to use the other phone and I'm going to show off the controls for buttons that were just in a corner. And we're back. Sorry about that, everyone. QuickTime decided to croak for some reason. But anyway, we're back here, and you'll see that I changed the controls. I already have a Nexus S emulator running right now. It is at a much lower resolution, but you'll see that that will not matter at all. And now we're going to start, and you'll see I set it to group controls, so now they're appearing in the corner here. You just click these to move around. And now if I switch over to the emulator, you'll see that there is a little bit of a problem. They're a little bit squished because this is in portrait mode, and because of the way I use the anchors, they get squished in the portrait mode. One way I could solve this for future reference is I could detect portrait mode, have only one setting for the group mode, and have it just in the middle and take up most of the space. Technically, for the landscape mode, there should be two grouped modes, one for the bottom left corner and one for the bottom right corner. But you'll notice I only have bottom left corner. This is just for demonstration purposes. It's not really interesting to show the process of doing the other corner, because all you're really doing is taking your X position anchors and taking that value, negating it, and adding one to it. Because that's all you really need to do is move the whole group over. Because to show in here in the HUD, the controls are grouped. That's how they're handled, so that way I can hide the ones that are not being used and show the ones that are. Now that I've shown that off, I'm going to show the code. First part we're at is options. As I mentioned, I won't be showing off the drop-down menu. I'll just show the main important points here. First, I'll show camera initialization. Here you'll see that we first have to initialize a webcam texture. That's the plane that you saw that was showing my face. It has to be a plane because currently, from what I can tell, you cannot have the texture placed on a UI element, unfortunately. So you have to use a plane. And then after that, we take the Take Picture button, which is what is used to take the snapshot and we hide it. And of course those buttons, the camera button and the take picture button, are here as public game objects so that you can just drag them into their appropriate spots in the editor. So here the important part of the drop down is the on control change. We take our new index and we set that as the current control scheme. That's what I will show next after showing the camera here. But the index is what determines which control scheme is being used. Finally, here we have the different functions that handle the camera. First, we have start recording. That takes the camera preview game object and sets its main texture to our webcam texture so that it displays what the camera is showing. Then we have that camera source play, and then we toggle our buttons. And then once we want to take the picture, we have a saved setting that takes our camera source and sets it to our player skin. And then we stop recording so that the image is just a still image instead of the recording. And then of course we toggle the buttons again. Here in shared settings, not much here. I just have a control scheme list that's initialized that has all the different possible options, as well as which index goes with each. That's really all that's here. Here in Network Manager, I add game objects to hold all the different containers that I showed earlier of the entire controls container, as well as the specific ones for the arrows grouped in the corner and the ones on the edges. Here we have that I find the controls game object, and then if I did find it, that means that it's been set up for this screen. This is just a safety check. It's not really necessary if you're consistent, but if we do find it, then we check to see which control scheme we're using. If we're not using one, which is the arrows in the corner, then we want to hide that control scheme. Same for the second one, which is the arrows on the edges. And then we want to initialize our modifiers for horizontal and vertical movement. That's what the player object reads to determine which way to go. So by default, we're at 0, which is the neutral position. Next, we're here at Paint Manager, and the only modification here is when the paint is splattered on the player. It finds the player object, sets the shared material, but the shared material is just a plain color. So if we have a player skin set, because we use the camera, then we want to make sure that our main texture is that player skin. By doing this, all that changed is the actual texture. The modified color from the material remains the same. Next we have the control reader. This is what gets called when the buttons are clicked. It's not much here. We have modifiers that are used. They are public so that if you were to click on a button in the editor, the modifiers would pop up and that determines which direction it goes. For horizontal, +1 is to the right, -1 is to the left. For vertical, +1 is up, -1 is down. And so basically all that I'm doing is that if the button is held down and we have a modifier set, then we want it to set that to the values we have in our network manager. I have these if checks so that you can press 2 buttons at once and you can move in both directions. So if you wanted to go up and right, for example. And then button released, we just set them both back to 0. Finally, we had the modifications to the player. Not really much here as far as the camera goes. All we do is check if we have a player skin, then we want to set that main texture. You'll notice I also set the color. That's because by default, the normal player is a gray color, and it would be difficult to see the player skin main texture if the color remained that dark gray color. So instead, I set the color to white, which is what all these ones are for. Next, we have the implementation of the controls. Here, I check which control scheme is being used. This is to check if the accelerometer is used. All I did was add in this check for the control scheme ID is 0. The only other real difference is this check here. If it's not 0, then we're using one of the arrow key controls, and both types of controls are using the same horizontal and vertical values, so I don't need to check them individually. I just check the values off of the network manager and set them to my horizontal and vertical, and then I add force as normal. And that's it here. The last thing I will do is show what this looks like on a real device. I will be demonstrating this with my tablet. Okay, so here you can see my tablet, my Nexus 7 tablet. I'll just go into the app right now. You should notice from the other emulators I showed, while this has a much better resolution, there was no difference in how things are displayed comparing the landscapes and the portrait modes. So first I'm going to show grouped. And for a moment I'm going to take a picture of myself. You can see I got a little up close and personal with this one, but we'll roll with it. I'm going to join a game I already started. You can see these are the controls when it's in landscape mode. Pros and cons I have with this scheme. The pros are that you only need to use one finger. Well, one hand really to control them. The downside is that the controls, because they're grouped together, sometimes you can get the feeling that they're not responsive. Now I'm going to show it in portrait. You can see this is how they were thinned out like in the phone. Now I'm going to go back and I'm going to start another session, but this time I will switch controls. I'm going to switch to edges. You can see works pretty much in the same way as on the phone. If I turn it sideways, it looks almost identical, so you can see that on the lower resolution devices it did not really matter. The controls just look the same way regardless. Pros and cons I have with this version. The pros is that it's much easier to go two directions at once, you can see here. The con of course is that since I have a bigger device here, you sometimes need to reach, whereas with that other version you had the controls just in one little spot, so you didn't have to reach as much. Regardless though, I find this to be the superior control choice for this game. I don't think the grouped version works as well. I'll be using a very similar control scheme for Gold Jump. Essentially you can move left and right in that game, so I'll have two big regions for that and just have buttons at the bottom to allow the player to jump and drop. I felt this was a good experience. It taught me to look at other control schemes than what I'm currently using, to explore other options and to give players the choice to express themselves in different ways. If you have any questions, feel free to leave a comment. Thanks for watching.